said, how long do you recommend studying to pass the LSAT?
So I feel like
that's a loaded question.
Anybody who takes it technically passes because there's no pass fail. So that is what's tricky. It's reframing, like, to get your goal score. It even then depends on where you're starting. So let's say, like, there are some people who start out like in the 120s, and there's also some people who start out in the high 160s. Like, you never know. But I would say, like, take into account how much time you have to study on a weekly basis healthily. That's like the key, healthily, with all your other commitments. And then think about, like, how much of an increase do you need? And this might change at different points in time, like, because people who are starting in the 120s, 130s, the same amount of time that it takes to, like, make a 10-point increase on the front end, like from 120 to 130, that's going to be like much easier to do with, like, let's say, you put in, I don't know, 10 hours a week for like a couple months. It's going to be really hard to make a jump from 160 to 170 with that same amount of effort if you're studying the correct, like, with the correct way and the correct focuses. It's a multifaceted journey.
It took me longer to get from 165 to I scored over 170. It took me longer to get from 165 to 170 than it did from 150 to 165. So those 15 points took me like a shorter amount of time than those at the end. Which I think is the higher you go up, the more difficult each point is, fewer questions, right? That you can miss. Have you seen that experience?
Can you rephrase the question? Sorry, I was like thinking about root beer.
You were thinking about what?
I was thinking about root beer. I think I have low blood sugar, but that's sorry. I got distracted.
Sorry, what was I don't remember what I was saying either. Something about how long to study. Okay, yeah, because the higher you go, also I think that it's one of those things, like, if you can go from a 150 to 160 in 3 months, then, like, why wouldn't you keep studying for another 3 months and try to get to a 170? I think it's a test that truly can change your lives, and you should try to max it out. So, like, I tell people, like, you shouldn't try to put a deadline on it, as hard as that is, but see to where you start to max out on your potential, because the higher you get, that's like free money, literally free money from schools. And I just know that, like, I'm so thankful that I didn't just settle like getting a 155, which is still a great score. Like, you're scoring better than like 50% of people out there. But by taking an extra 6 months and studying, now, like, I'm in that 170 range, and it was worth all of that hard work. I treated it like a full-time job, and I knew that every hour I studied was essentially worth $250 if I got a full ride. And I probably never make $250 an hour in my life. So it's like, essentially, when I was studying was like the most I was ever making. That's how I viewed it, at least. And I do think that there's just truly value in being exposed to the material over a longer length of time.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to study as much per day, but you'll still get the same, like you would study like 100 hours in 3 months versus 100 hours in 6 months. I think you would do better in the 100 hours in 6 months.
I think too, like, over a shorter amount of time, like, people don't necessarily like check in with themselves as to what they need and how they tailor their studying to that part of their journey. And sometimes, like, a large part of studying really is just getting used to the content. But like a 3-month plan is going to look very different from a 6-month plan, because you have it's different time to get acclimated, but also sometimes in that last, like, maybe you find that you're hitting a wall. Sometimes people don't realize they're hitting a wall if they're only studying for 3 months, because it's just like kind of like a shotgun. But in 6 months, you're like, I'm hitting a wall. How can I flip the script a little bit? Sometimes people make extra gains too, because they give themselves that time to adjust their plan and to tackle different things. So,
oh, that was such a good point. And the other cool thing that I'm becoming a bigger and bigger fan on is, if you study for like 6 months plus, I'm becoming a big fan of introducing the sections one section at a time. Because you don't have to learn as much as once. Like, if I just was meeting with a student today that she thought she was going to take April, but now she's going to take June because she's not applying for this year. So I was like, well, what's the point of taking April? You can wait and take June and then take July, and have a retake in July, still have time and take the test and stop all your applications in by September 1st of next year. But I told her, for this next month, literally just focus on logic games. because you don't have to overwhelm your brain with trying to learn 3 different sections at once. Get really comfortable with logic games. And then in February, we're going to introduce LR. She'll continue to study logic games, but she's only going to be bringing in one new thing. And then she might even do, you could even probably do, I would say then March we'll bring in reading comp, and then we'll continue to study all these sections on. Her diagnostic score is a 151. Her goal score is a 165. I think that's completely realistic with like good guidance and good material between now and June.
And I would say, like, I think especially if you're self-studying, attacking one section at a time is probably like the more helpful plan, just because like when you're self-studying, you're the one in control of making your plan most of the time, unless you get, you know, outside advice from a tutor or from like, you know, random free consults, blah 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 blah. But if you decide, oh, I'm going to do everything all at the same time, you have to curate that yourself, and you have to decide without a whole lot of guidance or expertise how you're going to attack everything. And that takes a lot of energy. It's a lot of stress. So, I mean, if you're self-studying and you don't have like a book that's giving you a really good guide, or even if the book is taking you all over the place and you don't feel comfortable, just kind of break it down to like, let's just like tackle one section at a time.
I recommend it for a lot of people. I love the LSAT trainer. I think it's a great info book. I think one thing I would change was, I told someone today, I'm like, just focus on the basics right now, and then literally just do the analytical reasoning chapters lessons. You do not have to do the book. I think that's something that's like you do not have to do the book in order.
This is true. This is very true.
On to Jasmine's weekly intro to logic game classes on Thursdays.